I'm standing here at the window of my studio in this old Cleveland neighborhood, watching the rain fall on the street below, and I'm thinking about how long I've been invisible. That's what I need to tell you about. My son's homework sitting on my kitchen table right now is saying things I've been too ashamed to say out loud for 8 years. Look, I'm not usually the kind of woman who shares her life like this, but I've been keeping something locked up so tight that it's starting to suffocate me. If my story can help even one person see what I couldn't see until it was almost too late, then maybe all this pain meant something. Let me back up. I've got to paint you the picture of who I was before everything got twisted. I'm 39 years old, living in this senior living studio with a kitchenette and these shared hallways where everybody knows everybody's business. It's a mixed-income area, older homes near downtown Cleveland, the kind of place where porches sag a little and neighbors still wave at each other. I've got my routines. I love listening to gospel music while I cook, and there's always something on that stove. This morning I had a sweet potato pie cooling on the windowsill, and the summer heat is doing that thing it does in Cleveland, making everything slow down, making the fans spin all day just to keep you from melting. I'm wearing this bright coral house dress with big pockets, the kind my mama used to wear. It's comfortable, safe. I keep tissues in one pocket and my reading glasses in the other. Small things. Simple life. The thing I held on to, was hope. I had this belief that if I just tried harder, sacrificed more, maybe things would finally get better. My son Marcus, he's been living with me, and his father. God, it's hard to even say this. His father was emotionally shutting us out. Complete erasure. We'd be in the same room, and it was like we weren't even there. The silent treatment would go on for weeks, and I'd be thinking, what did I do? What can I do different? There's this coffee can on the shelf in my kitchenette, full of saved buttons. My grandmother started that collection. Every time someone in the family got a new coat or shirt, she'd cut the buttons off the old one and save them, just in case. Just in case you needed to fix something. I look at that can sometimes, and I think about how we're all just collecting pieces, hoping we'll figure out how to put them together into something whole. So I gave money. A lot of money. I emptied my savings, took from my pension, handed over cash, thinking that if I just removed the financial stress, maybe he'd soften. Maybe he'd see us again. Maybe if I fixed the bills, paid for the car note on that Jaguar XJ he drives, maybe then he'd remember we existed. Marcus was getting quieter. I noticed, but I told myself it was just teenage stuff. Boys are withdrawn sometimes, right? I was too focused on trying to fix the unfixable. Then one summer afternoon, this is maybe 3 months ago, I'm looking through his backpack for his permission slip for school, and I find his homework assignments, English class, personal essays, and my baby, my sweet boy. He's written these pieces about feeling invisible, about watching his mother pour everything into a man who treats her like she's worthless. He wrote about feeling trapped, about wanting to escape this house, about how he started thinking maybe if he wasn't here, things would be easier for me. That sentence stopped my heart. That's when I knew I wasn't just hurting myself anymore. If you've ever felt like that, like you're giving everything and getting nothing back, would you hit that like button? Because I need you to know you're not alone in this. And maybe, just maybe, by sharing this story, we can help someone else who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want to follow where this goes, because I promise you, there's more to tell. Chapter 2. I need to take you back further, before everything fell apart, so you can understand why I stayed so long. Why I believed that more effort, more sacrifice, more money would finally be the answer. When Marcus was little, maybe 7 or 8, I used to cook Sunday dinners every week. Big spreads, fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, sweet potato pie. His father would invite people over, friends from work, guys from the neighborhood, and I'd spend all Saturday preparing. I'd be in that kitchen listening to gospel music, Shirley Caesar or Mahalia Jackson, and I felt like I was doing something that mattered, building a family, creating a home. His father would eat without saying thank you. He'd critique the seasoning or say the meat was dry. But then someone else would compliment the food, and he'd smile and take credit somehow, like he'd orchestrated the whole thing. And I'd tell myself it was fine. That's just how men are sometimes. They don't know how to show appreciation. I gave up so much during those years. I had this hobby, this thing I loved, which was just sitting and listening to music. Not doing anything else, just letting the songs wash over me. Gospel, R&B, old soul music. I'd put on my headphones and close my eyes and feel like I was somewhere else. But his father hated it. Said I was wasting time, said I should be doing something productive. So I stopped. I'd only listen when I was cooking now, because at least then I could say I was being useful. The financial sacrifice started small. $20 here, $50 there. He'd say the electric bill was higher than expected, or the car needed new tires, or there was some emergency at work that meant his paycheck would be short. And I'd pull from my savings because that's what you do, right? You help your family. You keep the household running. I kept a bottle of anointing oil in the medicine cabinet. I'm not the most religious person, but my faith has always been there, quiet and steady. I'd pray over that oil sometimes, asking God to soften his heart, to help him see how hard I was trying. I believed that if I just kept praying, kept giving, kept sacrificing, eventually something would shift. But the amounts got bigger. $100 became $200. $200 became $500. He started talking about investments, opportunities, business ventures that would set us up for life. He needed seed money. He needed to cover costs. He needed to show investors he was serious. I gave him access to my pension. I signed papers. I believed him. Marcus stopped playing outside as much. He used to ride his bike around the neighborhood, play basketball at the corner court with other kids. But he started staying in his room more, door closed, headphones on. When I'd ask if he wanted to go to the park or get ice cream, he'd just shrug, say he wasn't feeling it. I told myself it was puberty, hormones, growing pains. The silent treatment got worse. His father would go days without speaking to me directly. He'd talk around me, through Marcus. Tell your mother dinner's cold. Tell your mother I need my shirts ironed. Marcus would relay these messages with his eyes down, and I could see it was killing him. But I didn't know how to stop it. I kept cooking, kept cleaning, kept giving money. Because I believed, truly believed, that if I just did enough, tried hard enough, sacrificed deep enough, he'd finally see me, finally love us the way we deserved. There was this one Sunday, I remember it so clearly because it was Marcus's 13th birthday. I'd made his favorite sweet potato pie with extra cinnamon, and I'd saved up to buy him new shoes he'd been wanting. His father had promised to take him to a Cavaliers game. Marcus was so excited, had his jersey laid out on his bed, kept checking the time, and his father just didn't show up. Didn't call, didn't text, just went out with friends instead. I found Marcus in his room that night, crying silently into his pillow. I held him and told him it would be okay, that his father loved him. He just didn't know how to show it. But even as I said the words, I could feel how hollow they were, how I was making excuses for inexcusable behavior. The thing is, I believed my own lies. I believed that more effort would fix it, that more money would solve it, that more sacrifice would finally be enough. I look at that coffee can full of buttons now, and I think about how I was collecting all these pieces, thinking I could sew something together that was never meant to hold. Chapter 3. The loneliness was its own kind of death. I don't mean that dramatically. I mean it literally felt like parts of me were dying, shutting down, going numb. Marcus's 14th birthday came around, and I didn't even plan anything special. What was the point? His father wouldn't show up. I'd just end up consoling my son again, making more excuses. So I baked a small cake, just the two of us, and we ate it in silence at the kitchen table while the fan turned overhead and the summer heat pressed against the windows. There were all these small moments that accumulated. The time I got sick with the flu, couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. And his father didn't check on me once. Not once. Marcus brought me water and crackers, this child taking care of his mother because the grown man in the house couldn't be bothered. Or the time I mentioned wanting to visit my sister in Columbus for the weekend, and his father acted like I'd suggested abandoning the family, said someone needed to stay home, said I was being selfish. So I stayed. The microaggressions were constant. He'd forget to include me in conversations. He'd make plans without telling me, then act surprised when I didn't know about them. He'd move my things around the apartment, put them in different places, and when I'd ask where something was, he'd say he didn't touch it. Made me feel like I was losing my mind. Money kept disappearing. Larger amounts now. I'd check my bank account and see withdrawals I didn't remember making. When I asked about them, he'd say I'd authorized them. Said I must have forgotten. Said maybe I was getting confused in my old age. I'm 39. Not old. But he made me feel ancient. Used up. Forgettable. The coffee can on the shelf became this weird symbol for me. All these buttons, collected over generations, waiting to be useful. But most of them would never get used. They'd just sit there, saved for emergencies that never came or repairs that never happened. I started to feel like one of those buttons. Saved, set aside, forgotten. Then came the day that changed everything. I was looking for Marcus's permission slip for a school field trip. The backpack was on his bed, and I'm rifling through papers and folders, and I find his English homework. These personal essays they'd been assigned. The teacher had written comments in red ink, encouragement, praise for his honesty. I read the first one standing there in his room. It was about invisibility, about feeling like he didn't matter, about watching his mother disappear piece by piece and not knowing how to help her, about feeling guilty for existing because maybe if he wasn't here, I could leave. The second essay was worse. It was about escape, about imagining different lives. And there was this one line, this one sentence that I can still see when I close my eyes. Sometimes I think about what it would be like if I just wasn't here anymore, and I think my mom would finally feel free. I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning. My baby, my 14-year-old son, was writing about not existing because of me, because of what I'd allowed to happen in this house. I sat down on his bed, still holding the papers, and I started going through everything else in his backpack. There were more essays, rough drafts, journal entries, all of them about pain, about silence, about feeling trapped. That's when I knew I had to see the numbers, had to face what I'd been avoiding. I went to the bank the next morning, asked for account statements for the past 2 years. The teller printed them out, this thick stack of paper, and I sat in a chair by the window and went through every page. $12,000. I had given away $12,000 over 2 years. My savings account was nearly empty. My pension had been drained. There were transfers I didn't remember authorizing. Withdrawals that happened when I was at work or out of the house. I found receipts in my purse that I'd never seen before. Bills marked as paid that I'd never agreed to pay. A paper trail of systematic theft dressed up as family obligation. My body just quit. I stood up from that chair and my legs wouldn't work. I stood there in the middle of that bank, people walking around me, and I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand there frozen while my brain tried to process what I'd just learned. A security guard came over, asked if I was okay. I couldn't answer. My mouth wouldn't form words. Eventually, I made it to my car. Drove home somehow, though I don't remember the drive. Went into my apartment, locked the door, and collapsed onto my bed. I didn't get up for 3 days. Marcus knocked on my door, worried. His father didn't. Miss Thompson from down the hall, she noticed I hadn't picked up my mail, hadn't taken out my trash. She has her own key for emergencies, and she let herself in on day 3. Found me still in bed, still in the same clothes, staring at the ceiling. She sat down on the edge of the bed and said, "Baby, what happened?" And I told her. Everything, the money, the essays, the erasure, the silent treatment that had gone on for years, the way I'd been made to feel invisible in my own home. Miss Thompson's face went hard. She looked at Marcus's homework still sitting on my nightstand where I'd left it, and she said, "This ends now." I didn't know what she meant. Didn't know she had a history with his father. that they dated years ago before I came along, before everything went bad. Didn't know she'd seen this pattern before and had escaped it herself. But I was about to find out. Chapter 4. Miss Thompson didn't leave my apartment for the rest of that day. She made me get up, take a shower, eat something. Then she sat me down at my kitchen table and said we were going to make a plan. I didn't have the energy to argue. I just sat there in my coral house dress, staring at that coffee can full of buttons on the shelf, thinking about how many times I'd looked at that can and told myself I was saving things for later, for when they'd be needed. But what if later never came? What if I was just collecting pieces that would never get used? Miss Thompson called her daughter, who's a paralegal, had her come over that evening with folders and legal paperwork. They started documenting everything. The bank statements, the unauthorized transfers, Marcus's essays, the pattern of emotional abuse. His father came home late that night, walked in like nothing was wrong, saw Miss Thompson and her daughter sitting at my table with papers spread out, and his whole face changed. Not angry exactly, more like calculating, trying to figure out what was happening and how to control it. "What's going on here?" he asked, directed the question at me, not at them, like they weren't even there. "We're documenting financial abuse," Miss Thompson's daughter said, professional, cold. "And we're preparing to file charges." He laughed, actually laughed. "Financial abuse? I live here. I contribute to this household. You can't abuse someone financially when you're part of the family." "You've stolen over $12,000 from her accounts," Miss Thompson said. "That's not contribution. That's theft." He turned to me then, and his face did this thing it always did when he wanted to make me feel small, softened a little, wounded. "Baby, you know I was only trying to help us get ahead. Those investments I told you about, they're going to pay off. We just need a little more time." I opened my mouth to respond, to make another excuse, to try and smooth things over like I'd done 100 times before. But Miss Thompson put her hand on mine and squeezed. "She's done making excuses for you," she said. He looked at Marcus then, standing in the doorway of his room, watching. "Son, you understand, right? I've been trying to build something for our future. For you, your mother just doesn't see the big picture." Marcus didn't answer, just looked at his father with these flat, dead eyes that made my heart break all over again. Over the next few days, his father tried everything. Emotional manipulation, guilt, promises. He'd catch me alone in the kitchen and whisper about how we could work through this, how Miss Thompson was poisoning me against him, how he loved me and Marcus and just wanted to make things better. When that didn't work, he tried anger, slamming doors, breaking dishes, yelling about how ungrateful I was, how he'd sacrificed everything for this family, how I was throwing away our future over nothing. Marcus witnessed all of it. I could see him shrinking back into that quiet shell he'd built for himself, and it terrified me. We were supposed to be fixing things, but it felt like we were just making everything worse. Then his father tried the nuclear option. He called his own mother, his sister, his friends, told them I was having some kind of breakdown, that I was being influenced by crazy neighbors who had it out for him, that I was trying to destroy the family over made-up accusations. Some of them believed him. His mother called me crying, begging me to reconsider, saying every marriage has problems, but you work through them. His sister sent long text messages about forgiveness and the importance of keeping families together. But some of them didn't believe him. His cousin, who'd known him longer than anyone, called me and said he did the same thing to his ex-wife, took all her money and made her feel like she was the problem. Get out while you can. That was the first time I realized he'd done this before. The first time I understood this was a pattern, not a mistake. Miss Thompson kept working. She found more documentation, recorded conversations, built a case. But here's what nobody prepared me for: how much it would hurt to stand firm. Every time I said no to him, every time I didn't give in to his manipulation, it felt like I was tearing something out of my own chest, because part of me still loved him. Or maybe I loved the idea of what I'd thought we could be. The fantasy I'd built in my head where my sacrifice finally paid off, and he became the man I needed him to be. Marcus's English teacher called, said she was concerned about his recent essays, Asked if everything was okay at home, I told her the truth. All of it. And she said, "I'm glad you're getting help, because I've been teaching for 20 years. And I can tell you, kids don't write like that unless something is very wrong." That conversation stayed with me. Kids don't write like that unless something is very wrong. My son had been screaming for help in the only way he knew how, and I'd almost missed it. Miss Thompson's daughter finished the documentation on a Wednesday evening. She laid it all out on my kitchen table, organized and labeled, ready to present to authorities if needed. "Now we need to decide how you want to proceed," she said. "Legal action, mediation, or you can just cut him off completely and move on." I looked at all those papers, all that evidence of betrayal, and I thought about Marcus's essays, still in my nightstand drawer. "I want him to face what he's done," I said, "but not just with me. I want everyone to see it. I want it to be public." Miss Thompson smiled. "Then we do it at church." Chapter 5. The first time I cooked only what I wanted to eat, I cried. It was 2 days after Miss Thompson and I made our plan. His father had moved out temporarily, staying with a friend, while we sorted things out. The apartment was quiet. Marcus was at school, and I was standing in my kitchenette, looking at my empty stove, and I realized I didn't know what I wanted. For years, I'd cooked what he wanted, what Marcus liked, what guests might enjoy. I'd never just asked myself what I was hungry for. I made a single portion of sweet potato pie, just enough for me. Added extra cinnamon because I like it that way, even though he always said it was too much. Put it in the oven and listened to gospel music while it baked, not worrying about whether I should be doing something more productive. When it was done, I sat at my kitchen table with that slice of pie and a cup of coffee, and I ate slowly, tasting every bite. And I cried because it was the first time in years I'd done something purely for myself. That became my liberation symbol, cooking only what I wanted to eat. It sounds so small, but it was everything. Marcus noticed the change immediately. He came home from school that afternoon, smelled the cinnamon, and found me sitting at the table with my music playing and a smile on my face. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. "I'm getting there, baby. I'm getting there." Miss Thompson kept visiting, not to strategize anymore, just to sit with me. She'd bring her knitting and I'd play my music, and we'd just exist together in comfortable silence. She told me about her own experience with his father years ago, before I knew either of them. "He was different back then," she said. Or maybe I was just younger and didn't see the signs. But it was the same pattern, slowly taking control, making me question myself, taking my money a little at a time until one day I realized I had nothing left. "How'd you get out?" I asked. "I got mad," she said. "Real mad, the kind of angry that burns through fear. And I packed my stuff and left while he was at work. Didn't give him a chance to talk me out of it." I thought about that kind of anger, clean and clarifying. I wasn't there yet. Still felt too much sadness, too much grief for what I'd lost. But I could feel something building. The plan was set for Sunday service, 2 weeks away. That gave us time to reach out to key people in the church community, the ones who knew us, who'd seen his father's Jaguar XJ parked outside, who'd heard him talk about his business ventures and opportunities. We needed witnesses who could confirm the pattern. During those 2 weeks, his father tried to come back, showed up at the apartment with flowers, with promises, with accusations. I didn't let him in, talked to him through the door. "I'm not playing games," I said. "This is over. You're being manipulated by that bitter woman down the hall," he said. "She's always hated me. She's poisoning you against me." "No," I said. "You poisoned yourself. I'm just finally seeing clearly." He tried going through Marcus, took him to dinner one night, came back talking about how his father said this was all a misunderstanding, how adults have complicated financial arrangements, how sometimes mothers get confused about money. I sat Marcus down that night and showed him the bank statements, all of them, showed him the unauthorized transfers, the drained savings, the pension that was supposed to secure our future, now gone. "Baby, I need you to understand something," I said. "When someone loves you, they don't steal from you. They don't make you feel like you're losing your mind. They don't make you feel invisible." Marcus nodded slowly. "I wrote those essays because I thought if my teacher saw them, maybe someone would help us. I didn't know how to help you." That broke me open. My 14-year-old son had been trying to save me by writing cries for help in his homework, and I'd been so focused on trying to fix his father that I'd almost missed it. I made a decision that night. No matter how scary it was, no matter how much it hurt, we were going to be free. Not just legally or financially, actually free. Free from the weight of trying to earn love that would never come. Free from sacrificing ourselves on the altar of someone else's selfishness. I took out that bottle of anointing oil from the medicine cabinet, sat at my kitchen table with it in my hands. And instead of praying for his father to change, I prayed for strength to see this through. Prayed for Marcus to heal. Prayed for myself to find whatever was on the other side of this pain. The night before the church confrontation, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about what I'd say. How I'd stand there in front of everyone and expose what had happened. Part of me wanted to back out. Part of me still wanted to protect him, to make excuses, to believe that maybe I was overreacting. But then I'd think about Marcus's essays, about that coffee can full of buttons on the shelf, collected over generations, most of them never used. About how I'd spent years saving myself for a moment that never came. Miss Thompson came over early Sunday morning, helped me pick out what to wear, something different from my usual coral house dress, something that made me feel strong. "You ready?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I'm going anyway." Chapter 6. The church service started like always. Songs, prayers, announcements. His father was there, sitting near the front like he owned the place. That Jaguar XJ parked outside where everyone could see it. He'd always loved making an entrance. I sat in the back with Marcus and Miss Thompson, my heart hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The plan was to wait until the end, during the community testimony time, when people could share prayers or concerns. I watched him during the service. Watched how he nodded along with the sermon, how he shook hands with people, how he played the role of upstanding community member, and I thought about all the times I'd sat in these same pews, praying for him to become a better man, when the problem was never about him becoming better. The problem was that I kept accepting less. When testimony time came, I stood up before I could talk myself out of it. My legs were shaking, my voice came out smaller than I'd planned. "I need to share something with all of you," I said. "It's not easy, but my son wrote something in his schoolwork that made me realize silence is more dangerous than truth." The room got quiet. People turned to look. His father's face went completely blank. I walked to the front, Miss Thompson beside me, had copies of bank statements in a folder, copies of Marcus's essays, copies of unauthorized transactions and drained accounts. "For 2 years, I've been giving money to this man," I said, pointing at his father. "I thought I was helping our family. Thought if I sacrificed enough, tried hard enough, maybe things would get better. But he wasn't building our future. He was stealing it." His mother stood up. "That's a lie. He would never—" $12,000, I said, "over 2 years, from my savings, from my pension, without my knowledge or permission. I have the bank records right here." I held up the folder, heard people murmuring, saw his face go red. "And it wasn't just the money," I continued. "It was the way he made me feel invisible, the silent treatment that lasted weeks, the emotional exclusion, making our son feel like he didn't matter. Marcus wrote essays about wanting to disappear because of what we were living through." Marcus stood up then, in the back of the church, didn't say anything, just stood there so everyone could see him, see the truth of what I was saying written on his young face. "I set a test," I said, "with Miss Thompson's help. We created a situation where he thought he could get more money, and we watched what he did with it. Not bills, not investments, personal expenses, selfish spending on himself while claiming to be struggling." The pastor stood up. "These are serious accusations." "They're not accusations," Miss Thompson said. "They're documented facts. I have witness statements, recordings, a paper trail that shows 2 years of systematic financial abuse. His father finally found his voice, stood up and turned to face the congregation. This is insane. I've been supporting this family. Everything I did was for us. She's having some kind of breakdown, being influenced by who? I asked. By the woman you did the same thing to 15 years ago? By your ex-wife who you drained dry and left with nothing? Is everyone lying? Or is there a pattern here? He lunged toward me then. Not to hit, but to grab the folder, to destroy the evidence. 2 deacons caught him, held him back. And that's when everything broke. He started yelling about how ungrateful I was, how he'd wasted years on me, how I was nothing without him. The mask came completely off, and everyone saw it. His mother was crying. Some people were shocked. Others were nodding like pieces were finally clicking into place. The pastor asked us to step into his office to discuss this privately, but I said no. This has been private too long, I said. That's how he's gotten away with it. In private, he's charming. He makes you doubt yourself. He makes you think maybe you're the problem. But in public, when you lay out the facts, the truth is undeniable. I looked at Marcus. My son deserves better than growing up thinking this is what love looks like. And I deserve better than spending the rest of my life trying to earn scraps of affection from someone who sees me as a resource to exploit. The service ended in chaos. People approached me afterward, some to offer support, others to tell their own stories of how he'd borrowed money that was never repaid, made business deals that fell through, left others holding the bag. The web of manipulation was bigger than just me. His father left, got in that black Jaguar and drove away while people watched. His reputation in that community, the thing he'd cared about more than anything, was destroyed. Miss Thompson put her arm around me as we walked out into the summer heat. You did good, baby. You did real good. I felt empty, hollowed out, but also lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there until I finally set it down. Marcus was quiet on the drive home. When we got to the apartment, he went to his room, and I thought maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe this was too much. Maybe I'd humiliated him along with his father. But then he came back out with his homework folder, the one with all his essays, and he handed it to me. I don't need to keep these anymore, he said. I think the message got through. Chapter 7. I thought that would be the end of it. The confrontation at church, the public exposure, his father leaving in shame. I thought I could start rebuilding now, start focusing on healing. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the church incident, I was checking my mail and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a letter, printed on computer paper, no signature. It detailed allegations about me, said I was an unfit mother, said I'd been neglecting Marcus, said I had substance abuse problems and mental health issues that made me dangerous. The letter claimed to be from a concerned community member, but I knew who wrote it, knew it was his father's handwriting, even though he'd tried to disguise it by typing it out. At the bottom of the letter was a line that made my blood run cold. Copies of this letter have been sent to Child Protective Services, your employer, and 3 members of your church congregation. He was trying to destroy me from a distance. If he couldn't control me anymore, he'd burn my life down out of spite. I called Miss Thompson immediately. She came over, read the letter, and her face went hard. This is defamation, she said. Every word of it is a lie, and it's designed to harm your reputation. But the damage was already done. CPS did show up at my door 3 days later. A social worker with kind eyes and a clipboard, apologizing for the intrusion, but explaining they had to follow up on all reports. She interviewed Marcus alone, asked him about drugs in the home, about whether I'd ever hit him, about whether he felt safe. He told her the truth, about his father's theft, about the emotional abuse, about the essays he'd written. She looked at our clean apartment, at the fridge full of food, at Marcus's homework spread out on the kitchen table, showing good grades and consistent effort. I'm sorry you're going through this, she said as she left. The report is clearly malicious. But I had to verify. You understand. I did understand, but it still hurt. Still felt like another violation. My employer called me in for a meeting. Someone had sent them an anonymous letter making accusations about my mental stability. My supervisor was uncomfortable, clearly not believing the allegations, but needing to address them formally. I brought my documentation, explained what was happening. She was sympathetic, but suggested I might want to take some time off to handle my personal affairs. That night, I couldn't sleep. Laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how far his father was willing to go. He wasn't done hurting me. Maybe he'd never be done. But then something shifted in me, a clarity I hadn't had before. This was the final test, I realized. The last chance for me to fold, to give in, to let him win by exhausting me into submission. And I wasn't going to fold. The next morning, I contacted Miss Thompson's daughter, the paralegal. We filed for a restraining order and submitted a formal complaint to the police about the defamatory letters. We documented everything, added it to the existing evidence of financial abuse. But more importantly, I decided I wasn't going to live in fear anymore. Wasn't going to check over my shoulder or worry about what he'd do next. Because that's what he wanted. He wanted me to be so consumed with defending myself that I couldn't move forward. The justice came in unexpected ways. Not dramatic, not sudden, but cumulative. His business partners found out about the theft. They'd already been suspicious about missing funds, and when they heard what happened with me, they did their own audit, discovered he'd been skimming from the company for years. They filed charges. His professional reputation, the thing he'd built that black Jaguar lifestyle on, collapsed. People in the neighborhood started avoiding him. The ones who'd believed his lies at first started hearing the truth from others, started remembering their own strange interactions with him, money he'd borrowed and never repaid, promises he'd made and never kept. His mother finally called me. Not to defend him this time, to apologize. I knew, she said quietly. Deep down, I knew, but he's my son, and I wanted to believe he could change. I'm sorry I didn't stand with you. I didn't need her apology. But it mattered anyway. It meant I wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining things. The truth had power. Marcus's teacher assigned a new essay project. This time the topic was resilience, what it means to survive hard things. Marcus wrote about his mother standing up in church, about learning that love isn't supposed to hurt, about the difference between helping someone and being exploited. He got an A. The teacher wrote in the margins, "This is the most hopeful thing you've written all year." The restraining order was approved. His father had to stay away from me, from Marcus, from our home. The police investigation into the financial theft was moving forward. Slowly, but moving. I didn't need him to go to jail. Didn't need some dramatic punishment. I just needed him out of my life. And finally, he was. But the real justice was internal. It was the way I started holding my head higher. The way I stopped apologizing for taking up space. The way I could look at myself in the mirror and not see someone who'd been a fool for believing in love. Just someone who'd been brave enough to leave when she finally saw the truth. That coffee can on the shelf, full of saved buttons, didn't look sad anymore. It looked like a collection of possibilities, of things that could be used when they were actually needed. Not hoarded out of fear, but kept out of wisdom. And I was finally learning the difference. Chapter 8. 6 months after the church confrontation, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I went to a garden center and bought seeds. Not for him, not for impressing anyone, just because I wanted to grow things. My studio apartment didn't have a garden, but there was a small community plot behind the senior living center that residents could rent. 20 square feet of earth that was mine to do with as I pleased. I signed up for a space, spent a Saturday morning with my hands in the dirt, planting tomatoes and herbs and flowers. It felt revolutionary. This simple act of creating something for myself. Marcus helped me that first day. We worked side by side, not talking much, just being together in a way that felt new. Or maybe it felt old. Like we were remembering how to exist without the weight of his father's presence crushing the air between us. "You seem different, Mom," Marcus said, wiping dirt from his forehead. "How so?" "Lighter, Like you take up more space now. I thought about that, about how I'd spent years making myself smaller, quieter, less demanding, trying to avoid his father's anger or disappointment or silent treatment. Yeah, I said. I guess I do take up more space now. Feels good. The garden became my rebirth symbol. Every week I'd go tend it, pull weeds, water the plants, watch things grow. It was patience and care directed at something that actually responded to love. Miss Thompson started coming with me sometimes. We'd work our plots side by side, her growing vegetables, me doing a mix of practical and pretty. Other residents would stop by, share tips, compliment the progress. A little community formed around those garden plots that felt genuine in a way nothing had felt genuine in years. I'd always dreamed about having a small house with a garden to tend, somewhere that was fully mine. That dream felt possible now in a way it never had before. Not because I had the money yet, though I was rebuilding my savings slowly, but because I could imagine it without someone telling me it was impractical or selfish or impossible. I started doing other small things for myself too. Bought new music, spent Sundays listening to gospel with no other agenda, went to the library and got books I wanted to read, not educational materials for Marcus or self-help books about fixing relationships. Marcus's grades improved. He started smiling again, real smiles that reached his eyes. He joined the school's creative writing club, which his teacher had recommended, and he started writing different kinds of essays. Still honest, still raw, but no longer cries for help. Now they were observations about the world, stories about resilience, pieces about hope. His father tried to reach out a few times, emails that I deleted without reading, text messages that I blocked. He showed up at the senior center once, but the security guard didn't let him in. The restraining order held. Some people asked if I missed him, if I ever regretted burning everything down so publicly. The answer was complicated. I missed the fantasy of who I'd wanted him to be. I grieved the years I'd lost trying to make that fantasy real. But I didn't miss him. Didn't miss the silent treatment, or the financial manipulation, or the way he'd made me feel invisible in my own life. That coffee can of buttons became a metaphor I'd use when talking to Miss Thompson about healing. We'd sit in my apartment, drinking tea, and I'd talk about how I was finally using some of those saved pieces. Not frantically, trying to sew together something broken, but thoughtfully, when they were actually needed. You're rebuilding, Miss Thompson would say. That's what this is. You're rebuilding yourself from materials you already had, just using them different now. One evening, Marcus brought a friend home from school. A kid I'd never met before, laughing and loud, filling the apartment with teenage energy. They went to Marcus's room to work on homework, and I could hear them talking, joking, being normal kids. Later, after the friend left, Marcus came into the kitchen where I was cooking dinner. "That's the first time I've brought someone home in 2 years," he said. Yeah, I was always too embarrassed before, didn't want anyone to see how things were here. That hit me hard. My baby had been so ashamed of his own home that he'd isolated himself, and I hadn't even fully understood how deep the damage went. "Well, you can bring friends over whenever you want now," I said. "This is a safe place again." He hugged me. Full body hug, the kind he hadn't given me since he was little. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he whispered, "for standing up, for getting us out." I cried into his shoulder. This child who'd become my ally in ways he shouldn't have had to be, but also grateful that he'd stayed kind through all of it, that the poison hadn't infected him too deeply. The garden was thriving by late summer, tomatoes heavy on the vine, herbs bursting with growth, flowers attracting bees and butterflies. I'd sit out there in the evening, watching the sun set, and feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Simple, uncomplicated peace. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet. There was still too much healing to do. But peace. The kind that comes from knowing you're finally on the right path, even if that path is still long and uncertain. I started imagining that small house with a bigger garden. Started looking at listings online, calculating what I'd need to save. It felt far away, but possible. A goal to work toward. something to build. And for the first time in over a decade, I was building something for myself. Not trying to fix someone else, not sacrificing my future for someone else's present, just planting seeds and tending growth and trusting that with time and care, good things could bloom. Chapter 9. It's been almost a year now since I stood up in that church. Marcus is 15, doing well in school, writing essays that his teacher says show remarkable emotional maturity. He talks about becoming a writer someday, about telling stories that help people feel less alone. I'm still in the same studio apartment, but I've saved enough for a down payment on a small house. Looking at places on the outskirts of Cleveland, neighborhoods where I can afford something with actual yard space. The dream of a garden to tend is getting closer to reality every day. His father is gone from our lives completely. I heard through the neighborhood that he moved out of state, ran from the legal consequences and the destroyed reputation. Part of me feels something like pity for that. But mostly I just feel relieved. The financial damage is being slowly repaired. The police investigation led to restitution requirements, though I'm not holding my breath on seeing that money. More importantly, I've learned to be careful with my resources, to value my own security above someone else's manipulative demands. Miss Thompson remains my closest friend. We tend our garden plots side by side, and she's teaching me about different vegetables, about companion planting, about patience. Sometimes we talk about what we survived. More often, we just exist together in comfortable silence. I've been thinking a lot about the lessons from all this, about what I'd tell someone who's living what I lived. Because I know I'm not alone in this story. Global studies show that between 16% and 54% of older women have suffered violence from a partner, not just physical violence, emotional violence, financial abuse, the kind of systematic erosion of self that I experienced. And the World Health Organization estimates that 1 in 6 seniors worldwide suffers abuse. 1 in 6. That means in any gathering, someone is living through what I lived through. Someone is being erased right now. The warning signs are the invisible ones. It's the silent treatment that becomes a weapon. It's the way someone makes you feel like you're not enough, no matter what you do. It's the financial control dressed up as partnership or burden sharing. It's the isolation that happens so gradually you don't notice you've stopped existing to everyone but them. Here's what I've learned. Love should not require you to make yourself smaller. Love should not drain your bank account or your spirit. Love should not make your children write essays about wanting to disappear. Real love builds. It doesn't tear down. It doesn't manipulate or control or erase. I think about that coffee can of buttons sometimes, still sitting on my shelf. All those pieces collected over generations, saved for when they'd be needed. I used to see it as sad. Now I see it as wise. Sometimes you save things, not because you're afraid, but because you're preparing. And when the right moment comes, you'll know what to use and how to use it. Marcus's latest essay was about transformation, about how people can change not by becoming someone new, but by finally becoming who they always were underneath the damage. His teacher submitted it to a state writing competition. He won 2nd place. I framed that essay, hung it on my wall next to the window where I first stood watching the rain, feeling invisible. Now when I look at it, I see proof that pain can transform into something meaningful, that our worst experiences can become the stories that help others survive. The bottle of anointing oil is still in my medicine cabinet, but I don't use it to pray for other people to change anymore. I use it to bless myself, to remember that I'm worthy of care and protection and love. That doesn't hurt. The sweet potato pie I made last Sunday had extra cinnamon, exactly how I like it. I ate the whole thing over the course of a week, just for me, no apologies. That still feels revolutionary. I've started dating again. Nothing serious. Just coffee with a man I met at the library, conversation with someone who asks about my life and actually listens to the answers. It's strange and wonderful to be seen after so long being invisible. Marcus asked me the other day if I was happy now. I thought about that question. Thought about how happiness isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a practice you cultivate. Like a garden. Like tending small plots of earth and watching things grow. I'm getting there, I told him. Every day I'm getting a little closer. The season is changing now. Fall is coming to Cleveland, and the air is getting cooler. My garden is producing its last harvest before winter. I'll can some tomatoes, dry some herbs, save seeds for next year's planting. The cycle continues. That small house with a bigger garden is no longer just a dream. I put an offer in last week. The inspection is next Tuesday. If everything goes well, Marcus and I will have a real home for the first time in years. A place where no one makes us feel small, where we can be loud and take up space and exist without fear. Sometimes I think about what I'd tell that woman standing at the window watching rain, feeling invisible, not yet knowing that her son's homework held the key to everything changing. I'd tell her she's stronger than she knows, that the sacrifice she's making isn't love, it's self-destruction, that she deserves better and her son deserves better, and no amount of trying harder will fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. I'd tell her that liberation sometimes looks like cooking only what you want to eat, like planting a garden, like standing up in church and telling the truth even when your voice shakes. I'd tell her that her story matters, that there are others living it right now, that by speaking up, by refusing to be erased, she's not just saving herself, she's showing others that escape is possible. Have you lived this? Do you know someone who has? If any of this resonates with you, if you see yourself or someone you love in these patterns, please know you're not alone. The isolation is part of the abuse. The shame is part of the control. But you can break free. It won't be easy. It will hurt. But on the other side is peace. Hit that like button if this story helped you see something you needed to see. Subscribe so this message reaches someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere right now, someone is standing at a window feeling invisible, and they need to know that visibility is possible, that taking up space is your birthright, that you are worthy of love that builds instead of destroys. I found my son's homework assignments. What he wrote was a cry for help, and answering that cry, standing up and fighting back, was the hardest and best thing I've ever done. The buttons in that coffee can are still there, most of them unused. But now they're not sad remnants of the past. They're possibilities for the future. And I'm finally learning which ones to keep and which ones to let go.